All right, up next on our list of fallacies and biases, I decided to do this one basically because Ian Abernethy brought up in his video on, that's not real karate. Yeah, it's the same argument I've been making about, Wing Chun and other martial arts, and just something that we see over and over and over again in the forums online. People love to make up their minds and then kind of reverse engineer their evidence, and they end up in these problematic positions. I apologize if you can hear the shitty music coming from next door. So what we're really dealing with here, and what I wanted to bring up, is the no true Scotsman. No, direct correlation to Ian Abernethy there. But the no true Scotsman, right, is it's a fairly common example, fairly famous example. But the idea is, you hear something bad in the news and they go, oh, a Scottish man did that. And then the person receiving the news goes, well, no true Scotsman would do that, right? And so what that ends up being is that comes down to kind of the cascade of a larger kind of umbrella fallacy that breaks down into a bunch of multiple ones. And so what that is the faulty generalization fallacy. And faulty generalization is a big umbrella, and there's a bunch of subcategories in it. We're only going to talk about a couple here. And that one breaks down right into fallacy of accident and then to no true Scotsman. So the idea of the faulty generalization is that really you're coming to a conclusion based on a weak premise. And, that could happen for a number of reasons, but essentially, right, you got to get your ducks in a row before you make an argument. Now, when we get to fallacy of accident, what's happening is that you're making your case by ignoring exceptions, and sometimes those exceptions are important. And then we get down to no true Scotsman. It is then the specific and improper exclusion of a counterexample. And so the idea with the no true Scotsman thing is basically saying that just because you don't believe that a proper Scottish person or whatever, right, would behave in a certain way does not actually exclude the fact that the person behaving poorly was indeed a Scotsman, right? In our case, just because a Wing Chun guy, performed poorly doesn't mean that he's not a Wing Chun guy. But then vice versa. And mostly we hear the arguments in the reverse. Right? Mostly we hear the arguments kind of in the reverse, where they're basically where people have made up their minds that something like in the traditional martial arts doesn't work, and then you show them examples, they go, well, that wasn't real Wing Chun, that wasn't real karate. And again, and I've said this in other videos, well, one, how would you know? You don't study those things. And two, you've clearly just made up your mind on what something is, and you are now going to just improperly exclude counterexamples because it doesn't fit your narrative. And that is a hugely, hugely important point to make here, is just because something doesn't agree with your perception, your decision, your idea of something, doesn't mean it's not the thing. It might mean that your concept is too narrow. It doesn't necessarily mean it is, but it might mean that your concept is too narrow and is unnaturally, improperly excluding examples. Now, like I said, kind of is in the reverse, right? Is also among the faulty generalizations is the cherry picking fallacy. And the cherry picking fallacy, of course, then breaks down to nut picking, which is just the inverse. And then survivorship bias, which basically excludes the counterexamples, often due to, for lack of a better term, being hidden. Oftentimes people who fail at something will wash out early of a system, not get reported on. And then so you see an improper reporting of success, because essentially the people that were not succeeding self-selected out or were selected out and not reported on. And so these ones basically come down to just incomplete evidence, and that could again be intentional or unintentional, right? It could be just you were blind to evidence, which is fair. And if you were blind to evidence, you're presented with new evidence, it is your job to actually weigh the new evidence and see where it fits in with the model, right? You don't get to just exclude it because it doesn't agree with what your preconceived notion is. And so what we're dealing with here, whether you're saying that's not real karate, that's not real Wing Chun, whatever, the fact is that you have to be careful that the evidence matches the claim. If the evidence does not match and support the claim, then you need to adjust the claim. You don't just get to remove evidence. Now, it's perfectly fine to say, well, this counterexample is a rare example, so maybe in some cases this thing is appropriate, but by and large, it falls outside of the normal scope. That's perfectly fine to say if that's how the evidence lines up. But you don't get to necessarily exclude the exceptions. You should definitely report on the exceptions. And we see this in science too, right? When they do these studies and they do all their statistical math to kind of figure out where their averages are, and they plot their graphs and all that, like they don't exclude necessarily, most of the time, they don't exclude the outliers unless the outliers were deemed to be outliers for a reason outside of the scope of the trial. What they do is they report on them and say, like, look, here's where the bolus of everything is, and you're right, if it's normal distribution, here are the things that are outside of the bell curve. They're few and far between, but they do exist, blah, 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 right? That kind of thing goes. So we have to be careful with this stuff, right? Just because, I'm going to repeat myself here, right? But just because evidence doesn't agree with you doesn't mean the evidence is wrong. And just because the evidence doesn't agree with you doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, but it might mean there's more nuance in the argument than what you're giving. So it is very, very important not to make up your mind before all the evidence is there, because as we were seeing, these are in fact fallacies, which basically means that your argument, all a fallacy does is tell you that your argument is not sound. It does not mean that you're wrong. It means that you are not actually showing your work properly. So that's that, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Share this with your friends or anybody else who might be interested in this kind of content. If you happen to be in the Metro Phoenix area, come in for a class or just stop in to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Definitely check out our socials and our website that has all of our contact information and all of the other relevant information. And more than anything, check out our Substack. Our Substack will be containing all of the links that we use to cite and reference in our videos, as well as exclusive training content that will be available for premium members. Memberships are cheap, but you can also sign up for free, and we do have articles for free, and we will have more free articles available for you. It is a fantastic platform for what we're doing here, and we hope to see you over there. So I will talk to you guys later, and look out for the next one. Good journey.